Speaker.
Barbara Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak on the Smoke-Free Environments Tobacco Standardised Packaging Amendment Bill. I think that in this House today, all of us are in agreement as to the damage that smoking can actually inflict on one's health. We all know somebody who's been affected in some way, whether it is cancer, whether it is heart disease, whether it is lung disease. We know someone that has been affected. However, Mr Speaker, as New Zealand First has said all along, we are opposed to this bill. From the very beginning, when this legislation was first introduced back in 2013, New Zealand First voiced our concerns about the lack of clear evidence to demonstrate that plain packaging itself was effective. We also talked about the unintended consequences that we could foresee that are likely to happen when this bill comes into law. Mr Speaker, we are quite perturbed at the expenditure that is being directed towards a legal product. We have to remind people that $1.6 billion in excise tax is going into the government coffers every year, and this is due to rise to $1.8 billion in 2020. There is a clear ulterior motive here, and it is not public health as it should be. Those dollars could be invested into smoke-free programs. In New Zealand First, we remain unconvinced that plain or standardised packaging is effective in reducing the level of tobacco consumption. The evidence from Australia, who introduced plain packaging in 2011, indicated that there's been a steady decline in tobacco use over a long period of time, and that basically plain packaging has had no real effect on that. A survey that I read showed that 4 out of 5 states had actually increased rates of tobacco use in the year immediately following the introduction of the legislation. Victoria, Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia all showed increases. South Australia's tobacco usage rose from 16.7% to 19.4%. What they found over in Australia was that there was a different way of using tobacco. People's tobacco use continued, but rather than buying packs of cigarettes, people were purchasing roll-your-owns. Basically, they were purchasing based on price. So we don't believe that the evidence is there sufficiently to support this bill. Additionally, we are concerned about the potential illicit increase in illicit tobacco, which is currently estimated to be about 8% of tobacco sales. We believe that it is likely to increase as a result of this legislation and the continued increases in excise tax. Of all the time that we have spent in this House looking at this legislation, we believe that we've underestimated the intelligence of smokers here in New Zealand. Many of them will go out and buy their cigarettes. They will also buy packages to put them in. I myself know of people who go out and repack their cigarettes into something that is different than the cardboard packet. From a smoker's point of view, it's easily solved. I know this, as I've already been told, and I can't say that I have seen it, so I won't be saying that. We also know that these cigarette packets carry very graphic health warnings, horrible pictures with the adverse effects of smoking. However, over a period of time, people don't even notice these pictures. Therefore, making these images a little bit bigger is not really going to have the effect that it should have. Education in the harms of tobacco smoking is what is really required in this particular instance. So, if we're doing it for cigarettes, why aren't we doing it for other products that are causing New Zealanders harm. We know that there are a lot of them, alcohol, sugar, fat, salt. Many of us can be considered to be obese in New Zealand, and that actually costs the health system a conservative $868 million every year. So why aren't we targeting some of these other products? We believe that it's an area that demands attention before it's too late. We owe it to our health. We owe it to the health of Kiwis. And we know that the health system is already struggling to cope. In New Zealand First, we're very concerned about the harmful effects of alcohol on our society. We know that it's hazardous. We know that the hazardous rate of drinking is actually increasing year upon year. And it's alcohol that causes so much more harm than tobacco. So why isn't the government focused on this as well? If the government is so concerned about our health as New Zealanders, why didn't they support the introduction of a complete ban on sunbeds earlier this year when it had the opportunity? We have heard supporters of this bill say that tobacco companies use packaging to make their products more desirable. Yet when we go into a shop, into a dairy, into a supermarket, or even into a petrol station, we do not see any packets of cigarettes, any packets of tobacco, because they are in a locked cabinet away from the public's view. I understand that people say a few cigarette packets left lying around may entice young people to smoke, but if they were going to smoke, they smoke anyway, because most of them, and I have seen it myself, do not smoke the packet, they smoke what is inside the packet. That is what is attractive, not smoking the actual packet. So, Mr. Speaker, we were quite concerned. No, we will not smoke the packet, the cardboard. Okay. We put through 2 supplementary order papers to try and ensure that there was a reasonable lead-in to this legislation for the manufacturers and for the dairy owners. But of course, that got voted down. We know that many of these businesses are quite dependent on the sale of tobacco products, and it is difficult to estimate the quantity that is required. And I will emphasise for Mr. Bridges, we are not in the back pocket of the tobacco companies or any pocket. We sought to introduce common sense measures to ensure a smooth transition when this bill comes into force. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to conclude by saying New Zealand First does not support this bill. We know that smoking is a huge issue here and around the world. We know too that the goal of a smoke-free New Zealand in 2025 is just about impossible. We know that we sell a lot of cigarettes at the border and we depend on tourists to come in, and will they sort of follow our law in this area? We don't believe they will. We will be following this bill and its introduction very closely, and we'll be looking at the subsequent smoking rates and also to determine whether or not this legislation is going to slowly creep into other products that are harmful for all New Zealanders. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr.